exactly what Connacht needed from the game against Ebre. Alan Quinlan is here. Alan, how are you doing?
Good, thanks, Jerry. Yeah.
Not the straightforward weekend of 4 Irish province victories that maybe we're becoming slightly accustomed to. But let's talk about Connacht first. It is a really important season for everybody in Connacht, and I've made this point already, to remember that they are much closer to the team who won the league than the team that they had last season, and they've got to be ruthless and they've got to be efficient, and they can't be losing home games.
Yeah, they can't, and I think the disappointment of last week, obviously it's an easier game against Zebra this week, but they got a bit of confidence, and their attack was really good against a really strong Glasgow side, but ultimately they lost that game, and they had a very 9-point lead with probably 15 minutes to go, 20 minutes to go in that game, and so it was important that they got a good performance against Zebra, and a convincing one, a bonus point win.
Yeah, Paul Boyle is 21. I'm just reading about him today. He got 27 minutes under Keane last season, which I think was in one of the interprovincial games where he stuck him in and took him off, and that was it.
Yeah, that was against Munster, I think.
Yeah, and it turns out he's actually pretty good. Sometimes you need to look after your talent and gently introduce them and put them in teams.
Yeah, I think, look, I wouldn't blame Keane for that last year as such, because we didn't know a lot about him. He was, to be fair, he was very promising and strong and good under 20s. He was the under 20 captain at the Junior World Cup in 2017. He's obviously moved out of the Leinster academy. I don't think he made the academy.
Right, so sub-academy, right.
And trying to get an opportunity to go. So he was brilliant on Saturday and looks full of confidence, looks very athletic, physical. And Andy Friend was, given huge compliments to him after the game, and speaking about how he's going to improve and become hopefully a stalwart for them.
Do we know much about Andy Friend's style just yet? I mean, it's obviously very early on to be kind of saying, oh yeah, you can clearly see
it's going to be open and expansive, and I think it's a much more calmer kind of give the players a bit of freedom approach maybe than Kieran Keane. I think Kieran Keane wanted an open, expansive game, but probably didn't manage the personalities as well as maybe Andy Friend seems very upbeat, very kind of relaxed, and he's worked on creating a very positive vibe and a happy culture there, as opposed to maybe a relentless kind of pressurised environment that maybe didn't really suit that group last year under Kieran Keane. Because we have to remember, we're kind of lambasting Kieran Keane a little bit, and we have done, and he's to take some flack for that, but he was very successful in New Zealand in his coaching. I just think his approach wasn't the right approach last year with Connacht, and I think Andy Friend has come in and tried to really work on positivity and making the players positive. They are going to lose some games, but I think he's given them a bit of freedom and worked on that skill set, and they looked, like I said, against Glasgow last week, they looked exciting to watch again. They looked confident.
Yeah.
When it comes to someone like Boyle, who to a lot of people it's kind of like bursting on the scene, so to speak, at the weekend with a performance like that, how, within the Joe Schmidt camp, do you have to be at this outset to actually make a World Cup squad? Can somebody like Boyle, who is quite removed from the camp, you wouldn't even have him anywhere near the picture before last week, is it too late now, or is there a possibility that he gets in, he gets to know the Schmidt camp, and Schmidt gets to know him a little bit?
He'd have to have an extraordinary season, but I think if he does well for a while, and I think Joe Schmidt has been good at bringing guys in to train with the group, if they're someone who can go into the squad and play for Ireland in the future. So I wouldn't be surprised if Paul Boyle goes on to feature prominently for Connacht, that Joe Schmidt will call him in and have him training with the group, and that's a very sensible thing to do, and he's done that very regularly over the last couple of years, where he's brought in young guys. When Robbie Henshaw came on the scene first with Connacht, I think he trained Jordan Larmour, these guys, they were in before any of us knew anything about it. And they tend to keep
when he was doing his leaving cert.
Yeah, very young, and they tend to keep it quiet, not to put the pressure on him that I've trained with Ireland, and so I think he could do, but I think he just has to enjoy his rugby now. He's only 21. There'll be a little bit more focus on him now, even though it's only against Zebra. So if he comes up and plays in the Interpros against Leinster, Munster or Ulster, how is he going to perform then? Is he going to play 80 minutes? Is he going to mix it with international back rows that he's going to come up against? But still very, very young.
Good to have that strength and depth in the back row, because we desperately need some strength.
We need some back rows,
Neil Cronin's injury in the Glasgow game, was this the incident where they couldn't find
It was.
So they'll go to the TMO so Neil Cronin is he's carted off injured with what looks like a fairly serious injury, and it appears to have happened at a ruck where somebody comes in and torpedoes into the ruck.
Callum Gibbons, the 7 for Glasgow, he's abrasive. He's a very good player, super player, and he comes in quite aggressively with a swinging arm, and it was in from the side as well.
Referee goes to TMO, and the footage doesn't exist, or the angle isn't there. Which is it? I mean, I don't want to accidentally start a conspiracy theory here, but what happened?
Well, the TMO, I'm just checking it, was Neil Patterson, and Ben Whitehouse saw something at the corner of his eye, and to be fair, the camera angle is back a little bit, and it's hard to get in close. It looks like it's a bit of a charge into the ruck. He damages his shoulder, he goes off injured afterwards, and Ben Whitehouse, he said, I saw something out of my eye there, Neil, can you go and check that? And then, for some strange reason, Neil Patterson can't find it. He showed him a number of clips of previous rucks, and just that ruck wasn't there. So
have you seen this happen before?
Never. And I've sat in those trucks, and there's producers there, and it's the producer or the director needs to answer questions why they couldn't show the footage. Very, very, I suppose, unprofessional, if you like. And, it's something that we rely a lot on, this footage and TMOs now, and you imagine if it's a try and they can't find it. How can you not find the footage?
Yeah.
The footage is there. You've just had a recording, so somebody needs to come out and say why that footage wasn't there. Now, it was one of those 50-50s that, was it a charge in? Did he have an arm? Did he use the shoulder? So we can't say it was a yellow or red, or maybe he wasn't punished and he just physically went in and cleaned him out. But I think not being able to find the footage in this modern day is
madness.
It's crazy.
Yeah. From Munster's perspective, they were getting absolutely annihilated in that first half. Second half performance is much different. Second half performance also features a different team. There's significant changes. Tyke Byrne makes his debut. Carberry comes off the bench. Jack O'Tarty ends up coming on as well. What's the difference between the first and second half?
I think that when you go and play Glasgow, very strong side, and they showed that against Connacht the week before. It's not an easy place to go, the sports ground, and get a result, and 13 internationals on the field. And Ollie Kebble, the South African, Lou said, is a super player as well, and probably international standard. And Callum Gibbons will become Scottish qualified next year. So you could effectively say that 15 international standard players, very strong, full strength. And so, Munster need to learn from that a little bit, some of the younger players. And I think some of them are not young fellas anymore. Physically, just to get it, they made mistakes, and Glasgow punished them. They're a very good side, so it's not a place. It was always going to be a difficult result, but it was a similar result to last year, where physically they got out muscled a little bit. And then in the second half, they showed this reaction, and this aggressive reaction. So again, it's probably another steep kind of learning curve for them. There's no need to panic, obviously, because Munster have a lot of guys to come back into the squad. The big positives, I thought Carberry looked superb when he came on.
Why is he not starting?
Jack O'Tarty. Look, I think it's a case of feeding him back into the system, like some of the internationals are. So it's and it's probably given JJ Henron a fair shot as well, and a fair crack there. But look, when you're 22 points down on any team, there's always going to be a reaction, isn't there? You're always going to come out. The other team maybe sit back a bit cagey, and Munster were pounding away. Maybe another little concern is all the possession and all the territory they had in the second half. They forced a few passes, they knocked on a ball, and they turned it over. But they'll get some positives. It took them 69 minutes to get a try. Reece Marshall. Somebody
actually recorded the scandal incident, the Cronin incident off the TV. Have a look at this. So you can just hear in the bottom left there. That's what you're looking at there. So it's slow and on repeat. You can't kind of see the bit. The important bit is, does the arm swing at the end?
Yeah, you can see a swinging arm, and it's kind of hard. But you see Ben Whitehouse is right there. How he can say in the corner of my eye when he's looking in at the ruck, he needs to call that himself. But to be fair, he's relying on his TMO to help him there. Things happen so quickly. It looks like a bit of a charge in and a swinging arm, but we can't see the contact on the player.
That's almost on fast forward there,
it's very quick,
rapidness of that swing.
But how they cannot find the footage is beyond a joke. It's, to be fair, I'm I could say a few more bits on it, but
So Cronin looked like he's got game, right? He looks like...
yeah, he looks very good. He's robust, and I'm not surprised from his performances in the AIL. And it's a shame for him now, because this would have been a great kind of time for him to get a number of games. And if he's out for a number of weeks now, it's a big setback for him.
He's Sean Cronin's brother.
Sean Cronin's brother, yeah.
Yeah.
Sean Cronin's a Munster man as well, yeah. Who probably wasn't getting games at the start and moved on. But I think he's a really good player, and it's nice to see someone. I think he sends out a nice message as well that he's 26 and maybe he would have been called in and a lot of promise when he was younger. Then kind of just went playing club and teaching, and that he's good enough to come back to it. And I think he is good enough to play.
One of the best things we can do in sport is to make sure that the late bloomers don't slip through the net. And like, there's loads of people who end up, for whatever reason, Irish sport is littered with late bloomers who come into their own 26,
and
27.
sometimes it's a case of maybe they were studying or they didn't have the passion, desire, maybe they thought they were going on a different path, and then they get into a nice, comfortable, relaxed place and say, I'm going to give this a crack. So we shouldn't discourage people in their mid-20s from getting onto an inter-county team or getting on a professional rugby team or a soccer team or whatever.
Yeah, no, for sure. No one's panicking yet about that. Just in terms of the physicality, though, like, they do have some...
Billy Holland is injured as well, which is a blow from, and he captained the side the other night, but yeah, that physicality is probably, and it's something you don't associate with him, but when, look, Edinburgh, they're niggly, they're strong, they're a very good side, and they're experienced, and they came out of the blocks, and that was their goal, blow them away in the first half, and that happened. But there's lots of positives in the second half, the reaction. But I think Johan van Graan was more frustrated by that incident and maybe some mistakes and errors. And
he seemed very pissed off.
Yeah, you can see it in the guy's face. But look, there's no need to panic. They play the Ospreys next week, and an opportunity to get a result.
Like he was saying after the game, it was quite an abrupt interview, I guess, to put it kindly, on Air Sport afterwards, where his answers were quite short, and he says it's just the second game of the season. Whereas the way he said that, it kind of sounds like it's a bit more important in his own mind than the second game of the season. It's kind of like this continued period from the start of his Munster period, and that honeymoon period is definitely over at this point.
Yeah, it is the second game, but I think you build a bit of momentum from winning, and that would have made a good statement, not just externally but internally, that you can go and take on a side as good as Glasgow, and probably it's the manner you lose. If you lose by a couple of penalties and you're in the game, and I think it was just that manner of going 22 points down, and Glasgow just looked very, very strong and on the front foot a lot. So I think whether this morning in their video review and stuff, there'll be some harsh words and strong words, but yeah, we hear about this stamping the authority, and that's what he's got to do now. He's got to ask the questions, why this went wrong, that went wrong, and how we can do things differently. Like,
there's going to be a lot of things over the next few months and over the next 12 months that are going to be a little bit out of Van Graan's control. Like, just reading Brendan Fanning in the Sindo yesterday, just talking about the Joey Carberry situation, where Van Graan quietly will be expecting Carberry to be available to him the week before that Italy game in Chicago, because they're expected to put out a second team or whatever in Chicago for that particular Italy game. So ordinarily Joe Schmidt would want to have Carberry in the camp and everybody there together, whereas Van Graan on this occasion, because he's not playing that week and probably the weekend after, he'll probably be expecting him. I want him for Munster, and that there might be a little bit of kind of friction there, perhaps.
Yeah, it depends how the results are going, because he has other fly halves options. If Tyler Blandale is back, Ian Keatley is back, JJ Hanrahan, it mightn't come into a stage we want him, and it mightn't get touchy. I don't think it will. I think he'll understand the situation, and I think Joey Carberry will probably start against Italy, so I wouldn't think he'll be available for them if he's going to be playing the following week. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
You can't take a job in Irish rugby as a coach and halfway through decide that you're going to get pissed off when they start taking players off you.
You know from the start, and there's plenty of communication there, I think.
Some people in the past didn't fully understand it.
Yeah, Matt O'Connor didn't.
But everybody else understands it now.
Like, there's every chance he's completely fine with that. I'm just speculating.
I think he will be. I think he will be, and he'll know the score. And like I say, he has other options there as well, which he'll have to try and give those guys game time as well.
We were talking about potential bolters for the Ireland squad, and is Jean Klein going to make the Ireland squad? Is that is he at that level at the moment?
He needs a good season, but I like him. I think he's very physical, he's very strong, and he works incredibly hard. I think when you see off slow ball, when you see him coming around the corner, he's one guy who can really get through. He's not good footwork for a big guy, and he can get through between the two tacklers. And then when he has to run straight and put the head down, he's a bit of an enforcer, really.
Yeah.
Very, very strong on the maul. He pulls
a little bit
mauls
different
down.
from some of the other things that we have. A bit more James Ryan than Devon Toner, is he?
He's a Backy's Bota type player, Donegal Callan type player. I mean that respectfully, because I think if you have your left hand side second, or the guy who jumps to the front of the line out, who is a bit more physical, a bit more aggressive, maybe better sometimes without the ball, because they impose themselves around the field, and then you have your second or the number 5 who jumps in the middle of the line out, who's a little bit more silky with the skills, gets the ball in his hands a little bit more, calls the lineouts. That's your kind of perfect balance. We see a lot more athletic kind of footballing second rows playing together nowadays. You look at Retallick, he's a brilliant footballer for the All Blacks, but he's a bit of an enforcer as well, and a bit of an aggressor.
Yeah.
And it's good to have that. And I think Klein, skill wise, he probably needs to improve his skills a little bit. But very, very effective and aggressive. You come up against Argentina, who are trying to, really intimidate you. You throw Klein into that situation, and I've seen him do it with Munster last year, where big physical in the last 2 seasons, with big physical teams come to Thomond Park and they try and intimidate. And he's the one pulling down the maul, hitting rucks, cleaning guys out.
Where is he in the hierarchy then of second rows?
He's not as skillful as the other ones, but I tell you, he's not a million miles away from, because we don't have a massive list of guys there. There's 4 or 5 guys who are ahead of him probably, but I think he can certainly climb up into that Leinster game last year in Dublin, the semi-final, the clean out on Ross Byrne. He got yellow carded. People spoke about that and they kind of focused on that after the game. I thought he was fantastic in that game, aside from that incident. He's not a dirty player, he's physical. But I thought he was outstanding the whole way through that game against a really strong Leinster side, and really taking the ball around the fringes, not being afraid to, make those carries. So I think he's someone who could certainly come into the reckoning.
That second half Munster pack then is actually pretty close, or getting close enough to a first choice. Well, obviously CJ Sanders got to come back into it, but
Peter
O'Mahony. But you've got Tadhg in, you've got John Klein in, you've got like a bunch of players there who are going to be the backbone of this team when they're playing at full bore. And so you wouldn't be too worried about the physicality of that group.
Not really. And sometimes it's not physicality where you're not strong enough to turn up. It's maybe just, not coming out firing. And that's why, in all sport, winning away from home is difficult, because the home team have that extra bit of energy. They feel we can't lose here, our crowd will turn on us. So great teams win away from home, and you learn how to have a real attitude, and that's something that's a stronger, probably more settled side, and you bring Stander, O'Mahony, Clothy could come back into the mix as well. So it's Niall Scannell could come back involved as well. So there's a few other guys to come back into the group as well, but I don't think there'll be any issues with them up front. They have a lot of options this year, and Byrne is certainly a great addition to that group.
Cooney signed a new 3-year deal with Ulster at the weekend, and celebrated by another last-minute winner. Yeah,
and that's a great statement for them, because it's a positive story, isn't it? We know what happened last year. They've 2 good wins, 2 stuttery wins, if you like. You'd like to be winning a little bit more convincingly.
Yeah, so when you're in a team like this where you're scraping these wins, do you think this is great, we're playing badly and winning, or do you think, we're not really at it and we're just getting away with it?
You're taking the wins and you're going, Jesus, where we were last year, with a lot of these fixtures. And I think Dan McFarlane, they'll have to certainly work on a certain amount of things. They're quite porous in defence. But John Cooney, the excitement, and you saw the reaction of the players. They're jumping around the place. The crowd are walking out of the King's Pen saying that's 2 wins. We're in a better place, but they've got to build on it. But look, it's so early during the season for all the teams. It's very hard to kind of make assessments and say how good or one or the other.
Yeah. One quick point on that then. Leinster kind of will be disappointed with the fact that they've missed a couple of kicks in a game where they had a lot of their front line players out. The kind of mix of players was more towards the first team than second team, and they're just not they're just not firing at the minute.
It's a very strong Leinster side now. I was surprised with a lot of the internationals that came back in, Henshaw, Healy. So it was this very, very strong Leinster side. Jordan Larmour. But I think Tyke Furlong, of course, I couldn't believe that that he would be playing this early in the season, given lines last year, summer tour, all that kind of stuff. But they're obviously...
I think they're all going to give them a 3-month break in the season, secretly. I think there's something going on in the background there. Because you were talking, there was a Sexton interview in the Sunday Independent, and he was like, I played 22 games last year. It meant that I felt fit and fresh at the end of the season to go to Australia. So like they clearly, there was never any doubt in anybody's mind.
It's not as if these guys are going to play extra games. They'll probably have an allocated number thereabouts, and it'll be managed throughout the season. But I think I heard Leo Cullen saying after the game he was frustrated with their game management and some of their decision making. But the Scarlets are a strong side again at home, very strong side, full of internationals.
Keep them thinking that they can beat you. So it's a game later on in the season when you crush them when it's important.
Yeah,
I think you also need to give like valuable mention to that Fergus McFadden try on Saturday night. Like what an unbelievable finish, and also the try that never was, the Larmour and Lowe one on the left wing, which evolved forward pass. Can't remember who actually finished it off in the end on that occasion. Like over the summer, you kind of forgotten the power of that Leinster back three and just how many exciting moments they're going to give over the course of the season.
We're going to take a quick look at the Pro 14 fixtures coming up this week. We can stick those up for you now. So Connacht are at Edinburgh, that's on the 14th, and then so Leinster have Dragons at home, that's their first home game of the season at the RDS on Saturday afternoon. Did I skip one? I did. Munster Friday evening as well at so that's in Cork against the Ospreys. And then the last one that I'm looking for there are Ulster at the bottom down in South Africa in Nelson Mandela Bay against the Southern Kings. All of those games live on Air Sport this weekend, across the weekend. A quick mention of the Irish and France, the Wild Geese. Good weekend for the Paris lads. For Simon Zebo and Donncha Ryan, not so good for...
Good score, 57-7 against Eugene. Stade Francais beaten 42-20 against a very, very, very strong Clermont side. Paddy Butler scored for, we could give him a mention, fellow tip man for Poe against Grenoble. And he's been starting week after week. Sometimes we forget to mention Paddy Butler, a former Munster player, back row. He's doing really well, starts every week there. Dave Foley is there as well, and Sean Dougal. Simon Mannix is coaching there, obviously, who was so poor, doing well. Any other Irish we got to mention? No.
Jordan Murphy.
Lee Perpignan beating again Paddy Jackson, Leon. So Perpignan are really struggling there in the top 14. Leon beat him 22-16 at home. We
were complaining about Leicester being very badly run and sacking their coach after the opening fixture of the season, but then in comes Jordan Murphy and they stick 49 points up on Falcons.
Yeah, they conceded 33. Yeah, he was delighted, and after the game he was just wasn't taking too much credit for it. I think he just said that he believed that this is what they can do when they click and stuff like that. So sometimes it's just small change here or there, mentally change the approach, and they can get some positives. So it'll be interesting. But we named the players last week. They've top class players in that back line, and maybe a bit light up front.
And maybe you can get them cooking. Good stuff, Alan. Thanks very much for joining us.